This is Changeling the podcast.
Welcome to Changeling the podcast. Come for the glamour, stay for the vibes. I'm your host Josh, and with us is your other host Puka. Say hi, Puka.
Hail and well met.
What are we talking about today, Puka?
We are talking about Boggans.
Yes.
And the non-official Kithbook that they got after the original official Kithbook never materialized despite the many false promises.
Yep. Is that boggans.digitaldreaming.net website still there? I need to check that.
I believe you can still access it through the Wayback Machine, which has been a resource that we've turned to in the past. But yes, it was originally hosted on digitaldreaming.net.
Yeah, digitaldreaming.net's just gone now, unfortunately.
I have to say, when I looked at the credits page to this and saw that White Wolf Dark Spiral officially sanctioned White Wolf site banner, it's like, I'm a teenager again, clicking through web rings. So that was pretty great.
Yeah. Ooh, and in the credits, it says ebook.
Right? This fancy new technology they've just discovered.
It's like, I don't even think this is an ebook. It's a PDF. But
yeah, we should probably give some context around this because we did just have, actually, released today was our minisode on Book of Glamour and Keys to the Kingdom, which were the other two books that never materialized. So after Time of Judgment, Kithbook Boggans was certainly on Shamazon and other book purchase sites for pre-order, at least through 2005. But then once it became clear that it was not going to be published, there was a coalition of forumites and web denizens who had already been working on an unofficial one. And so this is kind of the consolidation and formalization and e-bookification of that effort.
Yeah, and like former guest Charlie Cantrell's on as did the layout and typesetting. Yes. Julia, I remember from Shadow Essence.
Yeah, and Thad, I remember
bad with names
vaguely.
Yeah, Melissa Uran did the art. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of artists here, and I mean, it all looks like original art. Like none of it is lifted from the. I can imagine that Melissa Uran's art might have been kind of already in the pipeline and slated for one or more of these books, but then maybe she graciously allowed it to be used.
But you could argue this is like the proto Storyteller Vault supplement.
Kind of, yeah. It even has the Boggan font. I mean, they went all out. So yeah, I believe this was released in October 2004. So it's a nice little piece of historical... I was about to say historical fiction, but it's not. It's real. So yeah, it's nice to see like the shout-outs. There are shouts out to New Bremen and various other relics of the past. That's where we were at when this came out. And I remember going to the website and looking through the material, but I didn't get the PDF until fairly recently, I think.
Yeah, this is the first time for the show I've ever actually properly read through this. I sort of skimmed it a little bit, but...
Well, I know listener and occasional guest Chig has talked about having printed out a copy of this because he enjoyed it so much. So, would you say, maybe we can kind of circle back to this. I'll ask the question now, and then at the end we can get back to this. Would you say that this kind of set a standard for homebrew material? Like when you call it Proto Storyteller's Vault? It's just something that I was kind of thinking about. Given 20 years ago, the tools that people had access to and the level of development that's at play here, that was kind of a question that I was thinking about as I read through.
Yeah, that's a good question to answer at the end. But I have an answer, so
okay.
That's what I think.
Well, because the point of the book is self-explanatory, and they even have a little note on the credits that says, well, we never got a Kithbook Boggans, so here we go. We're making our own. But yeah.
So it starts with intro fiction, which even continuing the kind of hard to read handwritten font on like burnt parchment.
Yeah, burnt parchment.
This feels very much like late stage Changeling supplements.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. But yeah, a lot of the elements, the look of it. Like if this was just slapped on a proper cover and like didn't say it was a fan supplement, like you could probably convince somebody this is just an official late revised era Changeling book.
And for many years, it was the Kithbook. So, I guess a brief overview of the story, we have the protagonist is a boggan named Philemon, who's a brewer of some kind, and he has a new variety of dross beer that he's sharing with local commoners at his freehold of Dodona's Oak. Then a fellow boggan warns him about a newcomer Aelil Shi to the area who wants to move in on his territory. The Aelil attempts to plant a redcap in an existing redcap gang to get the gang to attack the freehold, but the redcaps are like, that guy's our friend, and why are you so keen to attack him? And apparently they interrogate him and leave his comatose body outside the Shi's door.
Yep.
So then the Shi tries to give the troll captain of the barony or wherever they're living some false orders to arrest the proprietor, but then guess what? The troll is also a friend of the boggan and calls the Shi's bluff. So it's like...
Yeah, and the troll's like flat out saying, well, first of all, you're not following the correct things. And second of all, even if this was proper, I would resign before doing this, and so would my men. So it's like...
Yeah. It's not the greatest story, maybe. I mean, it's very exposition-y, but... I don't know. It's a change from the usual mythic tale of like how the Boggans got their birthright, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, I like it myself. Like, I think it.
Yeah,
it's kind of hilarious, actually, especially if you're familiar with Changeling. You're like,
and it shows something about the Boggans which we don't actually get much of, because it's not about their inherent powers or anything. Like, okay, yeah, he made a great beer, but there's nothing about their craft work. There's nothing about their thirst for gossip. Like, bits of it glimmer through, but ultimately what it's about is how they're linchpins of the community, and how everybody, even if they kind of sneer at them and be like, oh, they're such homebodies or whatever, they admire what they do for other fae. And that's cool.
Well, it's kind of like a reverse of the Kithbook Redcaps, where Kithbook Redcaps takes their birthright and makes it into a frailty.
Yeah.
This takes their frailty and almost makes it into a birthright, but not in a way that is wrong. It's just, you have to help people. Well, if you help a lot of people and you do it well and everyone knows that you're helping them, like, that could actually make you a lot of friends. So
there are enough Seelie changelings who do actually believe in never forget a debt that it will pay off. Law of large numbers. Well,
even the unseelie changelings are like, why would I... Like those unseelie redcaps, they're not selfless or anything, but they're like, why would I turn on this guy?
Yeah.
He gives us free beer.
Yeah, exactly. That being said, as we move into chapter 1, we're fully in character right out of the gate, and I'm always kind of like, oh, I don't know about this choice. So
it's very Kithbook.
It's very Kithbook. I'm not clear if it's supposed to be Philemon who's like telling the instructing the youth here.
But there's the young, recently saned boggan getting things explained by the wise older boggan.
Standard trope. One thing I will gripe about is that throughout this book, there are many game terms that are not capitalized, and it's really frustrating.
Well, that's a thing I've been trying to figure out what should be capitalized and what shouldn't be, and that gets... Like, I've heard a lot of people making fun of White Wolf books for overly capitalizing, so it gets...
Well, I think it's useful sometimes, though. I mean... Something like Kithane, which is very much a cultural group, I feel like deserves to be capitalized. Like, that's what you do with cultural groups. You make them into proper nouns.
Yeah. Not human, though.
No, but Kithane is not a strain of changelings.
That's true, right.
So
the English or something,
Yeah. In any case, this is our, what's the title here? Learning from the Past. So it's our standard history chapter.
Yep. It's sort of both of the tribes created the kiths and Tuatha created the kiths thing. Had this version has the War of the Trees, where the Tuatha were fighting the Fomorians. These are all just different history things. But I'm like, I'm fine with it if you don't take it. None of these is like supposed to be rigorously applied factual histories. These are just what this guy would say. So
I like this version, I'll admit. They also point out the War of the Trees supposedly happened when language was kind of arising among humans. So we're like way back in the past.
Yeah, way before the Sundering.
Yeah. And the narrator says that the early kiths were just as wild as the early humans. And I'm like, all right, I can roll with this.
Yep.
But they also say that they admit to not being first, and they're like, yeah, we actually came near the end so that we could clean up everyone else's mess. But the knockers came even later.
Yeah, there's a lot of little things about knockers in here.
Digs at the knockers. But during the war, they kind of prioritized attending to the humans who were the collateral damage, and that presumably is where their call of the needy frailty came from. It got ingrained into them.
Well, then the Tuatha said, "Oh no, you got to help everybody because you're just helping the humans on exchange instead of the
Yeah.
Kithane as well." But, yeah. A weird thing about Hestia being a Boggan.
Yeah. I thought she was a Dark Ages fae.
Well, maybe that's what. Anyway, I again, as a story, I like it. But
yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me that they didn't go with naming her Vesta, given that Ignis Vesta is a term for balefire that does pop up once in a while in the game. But yeah,
I mean, I think they used all the Greek god names, didn't they?
Yeah. It's interesting that like that's the one that they have used. Anyway, so yes, the Boggans taught humans cooking and crafting, civilizing forces to push the Fomorians away, but possibly also helping to spark the Sundering a little bit. So.
Yeah.
And I do like the note that they used to kind of be responsible for wider regions, but as the Sundering wore on, it kind of got whittled down to individual households and micromanagement. There's an interesting note musing on what would have happened if all of the Fae had left Earth. And it's like, oh, Earth would have just been like lost to banality long ago. By remaining on Earth, they're like, yeah, we helped keep the dream alive here. It's like, yeah.
And so there never would have been the resurgence, probably.
Yeah. They helped to craft the Changeling Way and offered tips on surviving in human society to the other kiths once the Shattering arrived because they knew what was up.
Yeah. There's stuff on like clerical Boggans, like monks and priests and nuns and stuff. I thought that made sense.
I could buy that as a pursuit for some of them, but it really makes it sound like the majority. And I'm like,
no, I don't think it was the majority. I think it was a significant, said a whole lot of us.
That's true. Abstract large number.
Yeah.
I can't envision it being as popular as it sounds.
Yeah, I mean, for Boggany type roles, it actually fits pretty well, I think, in some ways. But yeah.
But consider also that you had, I mean, certainly we get notes later about competition with the knockers, but like in the era of guilds and artisanship, like surely there must have been cobblers and silversmiths. And
this kind of presents it more like they're more farmers than...
Yeah. Or even like the town baker, back when there was one oven in town and everyone had to use it.
Yep.
We get an infamous potter later. I'm like, yeah, let's get some potters, potter Boggans. Anyway, another thing, I'm gonna try and like get my little complaints out there here and there, and everything I'm griping about. I think homebrew material in general shouldn't be kind of held to the same standard necessarily as published work. I think authors should try to hold themselves to a high standard. I try to hold myself to a high standard. But ultimately, this isn't going through a formal dev process or full editing, probably.
Okay, let me hear what this is, what your complaint is here.
Well, just that there are choices made in here that, had I been the editor for this book, I would have kind of cautioned against.
But I think if you go back to all the other supplements we've done, I think I have at least as many questionable choices in most of those books.
Yeah, but I mean, I compared this to like Changeling the Celtic Cycle, which labor of love that it was, it still had holes in it, which I feel like another person involved might have caught. And it wasn't necessarily, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a vibe.
I feel like to the standard of it, the standard of a Changeling supplement, I think this holds up with the professional ones.
Yeah. So, all right, circling back to the thing I was going to point out is another thing that comes up repeatedly in here are these kind of metagame references to the mechanics of the game. So the narrator of this section, conveying Boggan history to the young Boggan, says things like, well, and of course, as you know, we can do our craft labor in 1/3 the time that a human can. Would they be that specific? And
I think they would, like 1/3, like that. It's not like we're talking about like 1.37 times or something. Like,
I suppose so. It just comes up repeatedly, and that's what weirds me out. In any case,
it's clearly not twice as fast, and I could see them saying 1/3 instead of twice or 4 times.
It's kind of like a weird form of bleed where there's this in-character narrator conveying things that I know as an out-of-character player, and it throws me.
All of this here, I would be like perfectly fine with it saying that in game.
All right, to each their own. There's an interesting note about how in the aftermath of the American and French revolutions, they decided they were done with human politics.
But then they go on to saying that they're still involved in human politics.
Yeah. There's a sidebar on Molly Pitcher, which every New Jersey kid learns about in grade school, and if
Yeah.
they're lucky, can visit her very charming rest stop along the turnpike.
Yeah, I had to ask my husband about that one. I don't. There was one thing that is also showed up in a lot of books, and I guess it makes sense, like in character and stuff. But like, there was a lot of focus on U.S. political system stuff and Revolutionary War and all that in here. But we've had that in plenty of other Changeling books, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, bearing in mind, again, this was 2004, we're still in the era of there's more on the internet now, but still not a huge amount for.
Mm-hmm. This is incredibly Concordia focused, also, yeah. But...
Yeah. Write what you know, they say.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree with that statement, but, I can get behind the idea of the kith being at the forefront of the labor movement,
Mm-hmm.
supporting abolition, helping the destitute during the Depression, all of that. And I think the C20 book kind of hits similar historical notes.
Yeah. Oh, I love the sidebar on organized crime Boggans, though.
Oh, yeah. Brilliant. And then Al Capone as a Boggan Kinane, but he's also a vampire, so...
Well, it was Kinane that was embraced. That's what I can know.
Yeah. I don't remember him having the Fey blood merit, but maybe he has Mythoceria or something.
A very strange character at that point.
I'm going to go back and revise that stat block. The most interesting thing to me about this sidebar, though, is that it raises kind of moral questions around Call of the Needy that I like.
Mm-hmm.
It's like your mob associate needs you to help cut up a body or something in the butcher shop. It's like, well, Call of the Needy. Yep. So I like that as a thing for Unseelie Boggans. I'm not going to touch the Boggans being involved in prostitution rings piece. I find that a little bit off-brand, but I think it's kind of just thrown in here in kind of a weird way. In any case, so then they are surprisingly divided over the resurgence of the Sidhe. Because, I mean, I think in other books we've gotten the implication that the Boggans were like all in on the Sidhe coming back, and the ones who weren't were exceptional, but here it sounds a lot more balanced, as I think it should be.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. There's a lot of reasons for both sides with the Boggans, so
yeah,
like even more so than the trolls, I think.
Mm-hmm. And there's an implication that they have eyes and ears in all of the freeholds. I think they should have like a Varys level spy network. I like that.
But it's really just gossiping over while you're doing other stuff with the other Boggans. But
well, later on, there's a note in relation to the Slower where they're like, yeah, I mean, they collect secrets too, but what's the point of a secret? You can't share it with anybody. It's like, yeah, that sums it up pretty much.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of meta plot tie-ins as well. We have notes on the Urban Renewal League and Rotgut Redhelm.
Oh, I was like very confused about the High King David's disappearance because like it obviously took a lot of work, but it didn't result in somebody in power. So it's like, who put in that much work and that much skill and pulled off something so difficult,
right?
But wasn't able to capitalize on it? Like what?
Yeah. The rest of that portion where it says, well, most of the smaller kings and queens still retain their power. I'm like, well, yes, which in C20 is kind of becoming more and more of an issue when you think about it for any length of time.
Yep.
And that brings us up to the end of the history chapter. I guess it was fine. I mean, interesting takes, especially for a kith that rarely gets interesting takes on anything in their write-ups. I'm glad to see it here.
I just assume any of these history chapters are first person, even when they're written in the third person, because they all contradict each other. They're all told like stories. They're not.
Yeah. It's very overtly first person. And I say that as someone who has written first person Kithbook material, but I feel like you always need a little bit of a frame around it, at least implied.
Yeah, we don't know who the person is. That's part of it. Maybe that's part of it.
Yeah. But that takes us to chapter 2, Practical Living.
Yeah.
So here's like another moment where it says, oh, we could get things done 3 times faster than anybody else. I'm like, okay, you keep mentioning it.
Just said faster than everyone else. That's what you
right.
Think. Okay. And it's like highlighting, trying to make use of their strengths and weaknesses to survive and be okay.
Cultivating the useful, not dangerous sort of trope for their own preservation.
I'm also realizing with this, and especially with like the thing on birthrights and frailties, the changes for C20 kind of screw with this book. By making the craft work merit only apply to crafting.
You mean like physical, like working with your hands, building some kind of object?
Like wouldn't apply to like cleaning or any of those things, if I remember correctly. Maybe, I don't know, we'll have to get to the C20 book. Maybe.
Yeah. I don't know how many other abilities you would... I guess you could argue for like...
No, there's lots of like sweeping would not be crafting, and like
Yeah, but what else would you roll for
yeah,
it?
I don't know. I don't know if you'd roll. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the stuff should almost be things you just don't roll. But,
Dexterity plus athletics.
yeah.
The section floats the idea that Boggans kind of put up with being put upon because they like to know what's going on with everybody, and that's a small price to pay. And they are committed to the SG.
Yep.
With the possible exception of the right of ignorance.
Oh, right of demesne, they're also kind of, or domain, they're kind of like, this almost reads like unseelie she depiction of right domain.
Well, they believe in it. They just want to make sure the right people get the holdings.
Yep.
The people who are going to take care of them, which I do think C20 itself leans more in the direction of, like when you look at the rules around freeholds that have been developed and how like the freeholder has additional sort of responsibilities and powers.
Yeah. This one also, the right of light, there's like a lot of Christian stuff in here, which is a little bit interesting.
Yeah. Lots of Old Testament references in the history chapter too.
Yeah. If it assumes it's the same author, it's kind of,
Yeah. There's a whole page bar on the birthrights and frailties, and I actually quite like its take.
Yep.
Because they point out that for craft work, the Boggans must labor unobserved because that's how it is in the fairy tales. The whole point is that someone else can be assumed to have done the work, and they've done it in secret. And it talks about with social dynamics, the various uses of gossip. There's a reminder that call of the needy is not call of the whiny want it now, and if people are like trying to abuse the frailty, it won't work.
Yeah, but also like I like the idea of like boggan lawyer.
Yeah, or boggan community worker, or I feel like there's a lot more professionalization of those roles, and I say that as someone who has worked in the nonprofit industry, that there are now like jobs to be a community liaison or like something like a home health aide or whatever. And I wonder if, I don't think this book goes into it, I wonder how Boggans would feel about that process. The fact that those roles have kind of just moved away from being things you do as part of a community to things you get paid for, probably. I mean, there's still volunteerism and everything, but you can also have it be your job.
Yeah, I mean, there was also a lot of this stuff was jobs for a very long time. Like it's kind of...
Some of it, sure, yeah. In any case, we get some meditations on things Boggans like home and the comforts of home.
And then like fairy homes, otherwise known as freeholds.
Yeah, pipe smoking, thanks to Tolkien. Not really. It is mentioned, though. So. There's also a bit about the homestead as a separate concept from the freehold, although the two can overlap. And it's the place where they devote most of their attention and most of their attending to the needy. And
yeah, like they might own a bar that isn't a freehold.
Yeah.
They don't live in the bar, but that's their homestead.
Yeah. There's some notes about love. They often lose out, but they benefit from matchmakers and being tolerant of humans. There's a curious sidebar. A satyr talking about her boggan fetish, I guess. And she's polyandrous, and I'm like, you get it, girl.
Yep.
Then they talk about war. The trolls call some of their boggan comrades the badgers of battle because they're ferocious in a pinch. But usually they're more like medics and quartermasters and whatnot.
Yeah. The politics is usually they're not the leaders, but some boggans like to be the power by the throat who do get involved in politics, but plenty of boggans don't spend a huge amount of time on it.
Butlers know everything. I like them too as grassroots campaign workers. I like that as a concept. The gossip part. This is where the Slua thing is.
Yep.
What's the point in knowing a secret anyway? You can't share it with anyone or it won't be a secret anymore. All right.
And that other little sidebar on the top 10 rumors circulating in the gossip mill.
My favorite is number 8, which retcons Chief Greyhawk and Duke Topaz to having had a torrid love affair.
Yep.
So, it's like, all right.
This shows they'll have lots of gossip. Some of it's even true. Like that's the...
Yeah. Some of it is relevant to the meta plot.
But then, like, the founder of House Goodion's been spotted 3 times, and I don't know how to pronounce that word for Wales, the Welsh word for Wales, but
Cymru.
3 times the last month. Each time he was at a pub drinking beer. Like,
yeah, it's that's the gossip mill. I keep forgetting how short these chapters are. Like, this is really just, and I mean, there is a substantial amount of art as well.
Mhm.
So it's, I guess in the next chapter we'll get more into the court divisions and Seelie versus Unseelie. Given that Boggans are one of the more default Seelie kiths, I suppose, there is kind of like a Seelie vibe running through here. I
Mhm.
would have liked to see a little more contrast, but it does echo the existing kith books pretty solidly.
Yeah. I really contrast this with Kithbook Red Paps. I think that's.
Oh yeah, I I think it's way better.
I think they have about the same amount of text, um,
Yeah,
despite way lower page count.
and it does one up on Kithbook Red Caps because it actually has like character ideas and actionable details that you can pull out and immediately use
Mhm.
more often, which I think is the sign of a well-written Kithbook.
Mhm.
To be fair, they also had all of the existing ones to draw from to
Yeah.
compare with. So
Well, I mean, Kithbook Red Books had all but two
issue.
to draw. Yeah.
Nevertheless, so then chapter 3,
Mm-hmm.
friends and enemies.
Yeah. You have the two courts.
Here it is.
Talk about the Seelie Code. Their comment on honor, that's another. It's kind of funny. Like, the literal interpretation of most of the Seelie Code doesn't actually fit them. So,
Yeah.
but same goes for the Unseelie Code. So
They could have something like death before disrespect or something.
yeah.
Or impoliteness.
Yeah. Well, not just that. They'll stick to their beliefs. But I'm like, that's not really. Anyway, what does honor mean? That's a whole other question.
Nobody's sure. The She think they know, but they're wrong. I like the note that love is tied to every dream. I'm like, oh, and to strive for beauty in all of its forms, not just the pretty delicate stuff. The Unseelie Code notes I actually quite enjoy. So the idea of change is good, and the Boggan perspective being like, well, if you fix things and create things, that's a kind of change.
Well, I want to say never forget a debt. I like that it brought up not just they don't forget their debt, like the debts they owe others. They don't forget the debts others owe them, which I thought was anyway.
And there's a flaw that ties into that later. But yeah, common sense to repay debts. With Glamour is free, they have kind of a waste not, want not attitude, which I think is sensible. It's more sensible than a lot of the other Unseelie takes on Glamour is free, where they're like, oh, we're going to take what we want when we want.
Yeah, talking about the first person, this actually found this a little bit confusing because the Seelie Code and the Unseelie Code obviously changed who's saying it, but it doesn't say that. Right. So it's like, what? So
it's the kind of thing that I wonder on the webpage if there were two different pages and it made a lot more sense in that context. But yeah. Overall, though, there's a note that kith unity is more important than court division, even though the Seelie outnumber the Unseelie. And a desire to help others and hard work don't necessarily point a Boggan towards Seelie or Unseelie.
Yeah.
You know, more one than the other. And the whole kith benefits from the fact that others assume, oh, they must be Seelie. That's cool.
We get to their organizations of warrens, guilds, and secret societies. Warren, at first, I'm like, shouldn't that be a puka? But
yeah.
But then it's like, oh, okay, craft warren. I'm like, oh wait, I've heard that term. So that kind of.
Have you?
Yeah.
I've never heard that before. I use community of practice because I'm an academic.
No, I'm talking about like people referring to their own little craft warren.
I am unfamiliar. Sometimes they live together, but not always. Sometimes they work with knockers, but not always.
Yep.
In a competition between knocker toys and Boggan toys, who do you think would win?
What do you mean? Are you talking about which, when the kid opens it on like their birthday, would they be most excited about? Or do you mean which would they still be playing with 3 years later?
Well, with a knocker toy, I feel like they would be more likely to be dazzled by it, but it's more likely to explode.
Yeah, or not explode. I mean, that's kind of, but have a problem with it. Yeah.
Yeah, which could involve explosions.
Yeah, that's more of a goblin toy, though.
Nevertheless.
Yeah.
We get a whole passel of secret society alignments, only 2 of which I think are new.
Yeah.
There's the Benevolent Order of Blessed Michelina, or Michelina. I guess she's Italian. Michelina of Pesaro. It's implied that their leaders are Shirhain, the Immortals, but they're monks who help the mentally ill and watch for new changelings. And then the Knickknacks, who are like Robin Hoods for treasures and dross, who are embedded into various Shi courts. And then like 10 more.
Yeah, these are just mostly Warren, Concordia, and Fool's Luck.
Yeah. They have Boggans, a lot of them.
They don't actually mention Monkey's Paw, what book it's in, even though.
Monkey's Paw pops up like 5 different times, though.
Yep.
So, well, then we get the stereotypes.
I just didn't really like this part.
I concur. You first, though.
It's just a bunch of, first of all, it's italicized way too much. And it's just like random quotes from Boggans about everything. So it's like, it's just all over the place and doesn't, it's like you get like 6 plus.
5 to 7. I counted.
Yeah. It's like, this was unnecessary. How about like 1 or 2 per, like that Sealy Unsealy or something? Like, it's just too.
Yeah.
Yes, I get that there's a diversity of opinions, but they kind of make that clear in general. Like, it's not like.
Again, I wonder if this was something that came across much better on the website.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there was some kind of poll like, hey, everybody who plays a Boggan, in your character's voice, tell how they would feel about the various other kiths. Because it is the same Boggans over and over being quoted.
Yeah.
But
And then, like, comment, it's like on so many different groups. There's a
Right.
lot of mention of the Adheen in here. I'm like,
although thankfully there are fewer quotes for the prodigals and the non-kith.
yeah.
So.
I want to say, though, I feel like there should be more, probably all on Sealy, and certainly not even all of them, but like there shouldn't have been completely anti-Bogart. I would have thought there'd be some of them that have something not entirely terrible to say about the Bogarts. But
when the Boggarts were first introduced, I think there's even a note that says unseelie Boggans are generally like kind of willing to work with them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I would have, that's like my one complaint note I think I wrote.
Well, and the one take approach to the kith stereotypes sometimes gets some criticism, which I think it maybe deserves, like the sense of, well, you can't just have one representative of the kith be treated as every member of that kith's opinions.
No.
I like the original player's guide approach. I think it was original player's guide where you have one representative Sealy and one representative unsealy for everybody.
Yeah. I know Kithbook issue did that too, and probably some others.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, that would have been good. And then you just, I don't know, make a little thing saying, yeah, not all of them think this way, but this is like the most, I find it healthy to know the most common stereotypes. Doesn't mean everyone believes that. Just what's the sort of default common thing?
And there's just a lot of meta plot stuff mixed in.
Yeah.
Didn't need to be there. Overall thoughts on the...
Yeah. The chapter I thought did a decent job. You're right, a bit too meta plot heavy, and not the stereotypes. That was just, of course, that's a good chunk of the chapter. So
yeah. I liked the fleshing out of the unseelie side. I wish we had had more space on that.
Yeah.
But...
And then I don't know why that art was there. Like I'm here for the picture,
put it like, somewhere.
What? Why there?
I've done killed this sea serpent.
And we get chapter 4, Notables Among the Unnoticed, which this is an interesting collision. Like structurally, I'm kind of confused. This is different from the other books. Like the regular books, it was a bit confusing for me, but I know it starts with your favorite part of the Changeling background.
Yep, Elgin the Boggan, my favorite Dreamstone Keeper.
Yeah, you gotta love that Maddox stuff.
Well, I don't care for the Maddox stuff. I like Elgin and the Dreamstone, and I wish that they were completely separated from that entire story. And then we have Cynthia Kingsman, who has a freehold. Good for her. Frankie
James, the greatest thief in all of Concordia, or at least greatest pickpocket and cat burglar.
Is she, though?
No.
And then forecasting a little bit, we have a domovoi known as Chilovic. And you may think, domovoi? That didn't come out till C20. Well, buckle up, listeners. So we'll get to that. I kind of liked him as a character because he's like an orphaned mobster, and he ties into that whole sidebar on organized crime.
Although, if you're going to have your one Russian character be a mob, like organized crime,
that's true, yeah.
Gwilym Seneschal of... Your Welsh knowledge really helps with this.
Gwilym Seneschal of Gwynedd?
Yep.
Yeah. Who we've seen in Isle of the Mighty. He's like the steward of the realm and could be king if he wanted it. And then Belinda the Brave, who, although I don't care for the return of the warlike Nunahi trope, I kind of dig the little parable that we have here where it's like, oh, you know, all of the Kithane fled when the raiders came to attack them, but she stayed in her pottery shop, and when they broke in, she offered them tea, and one of them was going to kill her, but the leader was like, well, we can't kill her. She she's not fighting back, and she gave us gifts.
Yep.
Or not tea. She gave them water. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So the bloodless battle, they call it. And
well, I also gave him some pressed glaze pots and vases.
Yeah. Which she made in 1/3 the time that it would take a human.
wait, I'm a little bit confused. Something. Okay, so if you go through the pictures, I think there's an extra picture here. Or no, the Domovoy is in the next one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
How many of these do you think were people's PCs, though? Like Elgin was not, but then of the others.
Yeah, that sounds like all of them.
Yeah. And speaking of characters.
Yeah, I got really confused by this talking structurally. It just jumps right into your favorite part of every Kith book.
Do you know what? I'm going to say it. I actually kind of like these.
Yeah.
Overall.
I would just like a sort of chapter break or something to tell me I was getting into them.
I get that. Yeah, for sure. No, as templates go, I'm like, I kind of dig these. I mean, they certainly are. Mm-hmm. I think I like them even more because they are non-standard takes on Boggans. And I dig that. Like, none of them really are what you would call a homebody. None of them, I don't think any of them have freeholds. Like, they're not like keepers of... Oh, one of them has holdings. I take it back. But like, there's an unseelie childling who's like a super manipulative, precocious jerk. There's like a royal tailor, which I kind of wish was an opportunity to have a Garak level gossip monger, but
what ex-spy like?
Yeah, the protector of rogues who helps people evade the law and provides for a community. She was probably my favorite. The football coach one, I wasn't as into that. The Crusader, which Urk as a title, was okay. But then the other three, I'm like, yeah, these are solid characters. Also, I think they are all mechanically balanced because I checked the math on those dots.
Yeah, this is actually where I expect this over like a published book. I would expect the dots to work in this more.
Yes.
So like they even spent the 15 freebies correctly. And
Yep. How do we feel overall about the art in this book? Like,
I think it works.
It is quite mixed.
Yeah. I mean, besides, there's a few confusing choices.
Yeah.
And some of it's like, But I'm like, there's a lot of in the published stuff. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
So you get to the appendix. Interesting choice to bring back the Augmen from Dreams and Nightmares. I'm not actually sure how it's different when I'm reading through this.
It's not.
Yeah.
No, so, well, and I say that as I work on an Augmen thing for the Storyteller's Vault. It's mostly the same information as in Dreams and Nightmares, just elaborated a bit further. I think it's nice to have some examples of what it might look like in a game. Like if you go into the dreaming and you're like, well, I know that it's going to take the Boggan less time to finish these tasks. What does that look like? Or Call of the Needy. Okay, I know it intensifies in the dreaming. What does that look like? And it actually gives some, some pointers.
2 new abilities, which I find to be incredibly not a thing I would add to a game. Like it's...
Nope. Seneschal actually is an ability elsewhere. I can't remember if it's in Changeling, but it's definitely in like Dark Ages.
Yeah. I feel like these should be covered by other existing abilities.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Seneschal is also an art in Kithbook Names. I'm just going to keep pitching.
And then we get the Warren background.
Which kind of feels like just contacts. Specialized context, but still contact.
Yeah.
So.
And then we get a whole lot of treasures.
This is hands down my favorite part of the book.
Okay.
I love these. I think because like I actually want them. I want all of these treasures in my life. Like the blanket that always makes you warm and comfortable. I am currently recording with a blanket wrapped around me.
Wait, would that also make you cool when it's too warm?
It keeps you at the right temperature, presumably.
Oh my god, I need that. I need like 4 of those.
Yeah. And if it gets too hot, it's immediately followed by a small jar of salve that protects you from fire. So
I like pot of first helpings.
I do like pot of first helpings. That's probably, that and the knocking stick are probably my favorites.
Oh yeah, the knocking stick like that. I'm like, why is that only 3-point treasure? That's like so powerful.
That's like the keystone from the Immortal Eyes.
It, by the way, for our listeners, the knocking stick, you knock on something that's not magically sealed or sealed with cold iron, and it opens.
Yay!
Door, whatever, window.
And it is a stick, so you can thwap people with it and open their skulls.
Yep.
Presumably. The tools of war I found actually kind of lackluster, especially for a 5-point treasure, because they're just war weapons.
The nameless shield, I'm like, I have mechanical questions.
Yeah. buffs an army.
But it's also immunity to any blows?
Yeah.
No, that's a bit over the top. Even for a legendary treasure.
The Tools of War and the Nameless Shield together felt a little off-brand for me. I think
Mm-hmm.
the lower level treasures were much more in the Boggan spirit, so to suddenly give them these like war things, I'm like, wait,
Yeah,
what?
the legendary treasure should have been something that seems incredibly like mundane, but it's just over the top mundaneness. Anyway.
Yeah. So those treasures I contrast with the merits and flaws, which I'm less of a fan of.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of -2 difficulties from the merits. I'm not a fan of
A
those
lot of
either.
these seem familiar too. I'm like,
Yeah.
haven't we seen Nimble Fingers somewhere before?
Or yeah, see, everything's either things are at +2 difficulty or -2 difficulty.
Yeah.
I don't like those difficulty modifying things much.
There's also ones where there are merits that seem to lack a clear benefit. So like night worker is a 2-point merit, and it's like, oh, you really like working at night. Like, is that a merit?
I thought that maybe it meant you can work at night in addition, but then like the rules where I'm like, that just sounds like the rules for doing it.
Yeah.
Like, I've done that.
You can pull an all-nighter. Like,
Yeah.
Congrats. Would you rather be able to pull an all-nighter or
get -2 difficulty to your fine motor skills? That is not my merit. But
I did find the aversion to clothing flaw interesting, at least. There's story potential there. It makes for difficult role-playing, potentially, but it's interesting. And the bean counter one, too, where it's like, yeah, you'll help people, but they better get you back.
Trusted kind of makes sense. Although, maybe it's not described what trust is abused too much, what that means.
Yeah. Again, it's like, you have the benefits of the merit reputation. Give me something else to work with here. It's like, okay, trusted. And then, my biggest pet peeve, we saw this in Kithbook Trolls, hidden strength or hidden stamina, a 6-point merit to give you a dot in either strength or stamina, which costs 5 freebie points.
Yeah, and
so you are losing freebies.
It doesn't even say this can take you over the top or whatever.
The implication seems to be that it's not apparent that you have this strength or stamina, so it's like you're spending a premium for that deception, but there's nothing about attributes that I can recall that kind of indicates like, oh, you know someone has strength 5 when you look at them.
There's plenty of people I know that like I know it like I've known a lot of people who like don't look very strong, and then you see them lift something, you're like, oh.
Yeah. So not super into the merits and flaws.
And then this is more of a layout issue. How do you pronounce it? Domovoy?
Domovoy.
It looks like it's another merit or flaw, the way they've written it down.
Yeah.
Maybe
an additional space would have been helpful. Bonus points, though, they got the plural correct, because it's one domovoy more than one domovier.
That's it. The font they have makes it hard to distinguish heading levels.
Yeah. That is indeed the case. Anyway, thoughts on the domovier?
I like the concept, like the write-up stuff in general. The specific mechanics, I'm like, it's like I'd want to take the basic ideas and kind of read. Although the fire's blessing, I'm like, that is not a birthright. That does not make work for me as a birthright. You can make a weird ointment that makes things resistant to fire. I'm like, what? That's not a birthright. That's like a treasure or something.
Which we get in the treasure section. Yeah. It does say, born of the frozen mountains, the domovier have learned to embrace the warmth of fire without suffering deadly burns, which makes it sound like they inherently are immune to fire, but it doesn't really say that.
Yeah, I would have done this. Like I said, like, okay, that first statement could have been something.
Yeah.
Ivan's blood binding, I'm like, okay, that must be from the myth, but also it doesn't say what's a birthright, what's a frailty.
Yeah, you just have to figure it out.
Wait, what's their 2 birthrights? Oh, they have the one of the Boggan ones.
Yeah, they have Kraftwerk. They have Kraftwerk. For anyone not reading along, the domovier are spawned from dreams similar to the Boggans. They have to help and protect a mortal family mythologically while benefiting from their hearth or stove. And the background myth that we get makes it clear that this is punishment for past misdeeds. They helped a poor mortal to defeat a dragon in order to rescue a fey princess, but then took credit for her rescue until she called them out. So now whenever they encounter one of the descendants of that princess and her farm husband, who they initially betrayed, they are compelled to swear an oath of protection towards that person and their family. And that's their frailty. They have a year and a day to swear that oath, where they start gaining dots of banality for each
Mhm.
cycle of the moon. But they're similar to the Boggans in that they enjoy honest labor and companionship.
Mhm.
They like telling stories and riddles around a fire, which they're intimately tied to. And there's a note that if they don't have a beard, they're oath breakers. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
that's a choice. I'm not super familiar on the myth of the Domovie, but I suppose this is maybe more mythologically nuanced than the version we get in the C20 Kith creation example.
I think that this is almost an example of why hewing too closely,
Yeah.
assuming it is going to the folklore, sometimes hewing too closely to the folklore doesn't make for a good kith.
Yeah,
So
it does feel less playable overall. So,
it's kind of confusing. It's like, what if you just don't find somebody who's, yeah.
well, because they don't crystallize until they encounter one of those people.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's the workaround, I guess.
So it's just like these people have no idea. Like they have a totally different last name. They have no connection. And there's just like weirdos wanting to help them all the
Right.
time.
But there's notes about role playing one, which for these sort of niche case kiths is helpful.
Mhm.
So I dig that. I like that it's in here. I don't mind it being
Mhm.
in the same way that I don't think I would ever want to play a river hag. I'm
Yeah.
still glad they exist in the Red Caps Kith
Yes.
book.
Yeah. No, my thing, I like this kith existing. I just would have refinements that I'd want to do for it.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Anyway, that's the appendix.
Yep. Then we got, sorry, the kith, the black and white on my version character sheets.
Mine too.
Yeah, but it said full color at the beginning.
Yeah, I know there was a full color
Yeah.
character sheet because it's on Mr. Gaughan's site.
Okay.
Note also, Mr. Gaughan has been doing this for over 20 years and is a miracle to the community. So please go support Mr. Gaughan on the Storyteller's Vault.
Yes, and proof that, the old rules for hitting Grumptum at 25 and then you're falling to banality are just not accurate.
Nonsense.
Yep.
And then we get an ad at the end for drivethroughrpg.com that says Keys to the Kingdom and the Book of Glamour are coming soon.
Did this make you just...
I put a little angry face in my notes.
Yep. Like, why did they do that?
They knew by this point.
No, I was still arguing because somebody had told me it was coming at this point. And I was convinced still. I think it wasn't like 2006 that I was finally disillusioned of it ever happening.
Well, better late than never.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the book.
Yeah.
Overall.
What are my overall thoughts or your overall?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get you go first.
No, go for it.
I think this is one of the better Kith books.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's like right up there. Like better than most of them.
I don't think it's the best, but I would agree with better.
My biggest, there's a few little things. There was like a weird typo at one point and like a few little things. But like my biggest problem with it is like it was sorely needed. I think it really does help with Boggans, like in the right view. Like more nuanced and whatever. There's nothing in here that made me like wowed me. Like most of the other Kith books and supplements in general, like even the ones that have terrible things that I really don't like, will also have like, oh wow, that part's amazing. Why is it in this? This book had like, maybe it's because it's Boggans. Maybe it was more like a workhorse, respectable Kith book.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot. I know we talked about this certainly when we talked about Kithbook Issue, and I think also Kithbook Puka, that even though Changeling didn't get a revised edition, the revised era splat books had an influence on the latter day Kith books. And I think that shows through here as well, where there's kind of like attention to the mundane details. Like there is crunch, but the crunch isn't the most important part of the book. I don't know if you had the experience of like when you would get a new World of Darkness book, immediately flipping to the back to see the new powers and everything. But like,
no, I didn't.
That's less important here.
Yeah.
So.
Maybe I was like burned by like revised Toreador, where you're like,
they still had a few combo disciplines.
Okay, but I liked it, but it was not. I was not reading that for the disciplines.
But that's what I mean, though, is when you compare that to the older splat books, where the crunch was the only thing worth looking at in many cases.
Yeah.
There's a lot more history and culture.
But also a lot of times the crunch was there. I wouldn't say it was worth looking at.
Well, that's across the board for many of them. I would probably rank this. I think it resembles Slua in a lot of ways. I would still say Slua is tighter and maybe my favorite still. But I would probably rank it like third.
What's second?
Probably Issue. I know Issue has its issues, but it's just so
Yeah.
packed with so much stuff that's awesome.
Yeah, I might actually put this second after Slua.
Yeah.
But, because then you're like, okay, well, I like Redcaps more than you, but I'd still put this way ahead of Redcaps. I mean, Trolls is at the bottom for me, but I can't.
Aw. Well, it was first. They had to
Yeah.
iron things out. But to return to the context of early 2000s homebrew for a minute, considering that what you had to compare this with were like free web pages that people had cobbled together and posted. And
Yeah.
it really, to me, points to the enthusiasm that players had for the game and the rich community that was
Yeah.
on the forums endlessly coming up with stuff like this.
Well, I think this still sets a high bar for community, like storyteller vault content today.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is better. I'm certainly not going to say the ones that are worse, but I think this is better than most storyteller vault content I've seen.
Oh, geez. I hope mine isn't on the worst list.
No, yours is good. But
yeah.
let's not get into naming everybody.
No. And it's not perfect by any means. Like I see lots of stuff both in terms of content and construction that I would tweak, but it more than does justice for what it sets out to do.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it definitely more than meets the standard of what we saw in officially published material. So
yeah. And in a sense, I wonder if canceling the game kind of drove people to take it more seriously, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like if this was done in late art house era, it would have been shoddier.
Well, it was a webpage.
No, but if this book had been published, like if this had come out.
Like if the actual team had actually made it.
Yeah, I feel like given some of the other stuff, I think there would have been shoddier parts, and there still would have been good writing and things, but
I think it would have resembled Redcaps in having lots of white space and giant art because they couldn't.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think it would have any more art or words than Kithbook Redcaps had. I don't think or this book had. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's an example of where we were at this point in the game's history, and yeah,
it'll be interesting when we do the official Kithbook Boggans.
Well, to that we did have one question / comment from the audience from Sanchiger, asking, "How is this better than the official Kithbook? And what does it get better and what does it get worse?" So I think, we'll get into it more when we get to the actual C21, but I do think the C21 is by and large an improvement.
Oh,
I do.
I disagree.
Oh, all right.
I found the C21, I really did not like it.
Oh, no.
So
I'd have to give it a deeper read again.
Yeah, but it was. There's books that I'm like, before we do an episode on it, where I'm like, oh, I do not like this book, and then I read, I'm like, oh no, this was good. But so maybe that'll happen. But like the C20 Boggans was just, they were too nice, too friendly, too sealy, too.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, and it didn't leave me going. This book led me going, oh, these are new takes on Boggans, new ways to approach them, more nuance. So my impression of C21 doesn't do that for me. But
so. The gripes that I had about this one that I've already mentioned don't occur in the official book, and that I think goes a long way in the sense of the voice is more coherent to me. The overall text is a lot more coherent to me because it wasn't presumably created by, let's make this webpage and then this one and then this one and then put it all together. It was intentionally from start to finish created, I assume. But
when I think of these kind of books, though, like, that stuff feels like icing on the cake for me. The important part is, like, if you hand this to a storyteller or player, what effect will it have on how they view and play Boggans?
Yeah.
And I think this one wins out over the C21, at least for me.
I'll have to bear this in mind as I give it a deeper read, because I just kind of did a surface level comparison.
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting how this one went all in on the stereotypes with like all the quotes from the different Boggans, whereas the official one, we get like a whole subchapter on how the Boggans are in every single noble house.
Yeah.
One thing that I do think, two things that this book does better in terms of crunch: the treasures are fantastic, and the official book only has a single treasure in it. And then having the Domovier, having that bonus kith, is something that I like. So those two things.
Well, there's a crunch lacking thing. I can tell you the Kithbook C20 Boggans does not have extra pointless abilities. So
that is true. Yes. So something to bear in mind then for the next one, looking at how to operationalize atypical Boggans.
Yeah.
I suspect it's probably buried in there. It might not be quite so highlighted.
Yeah. And not even just approximately atypical boggans, but like more depth for boggans in general, even if ones would technically fall under stereotype too. But
yeah. In the end, though, this is freely available, so use both.
Mm-hmm.
I generally don't want to compare one to the other. I want to compare this Kithbook to the other old Kithbooks.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can do that with more honesty.
Yeah. Was there any overlap in people working on both of those two books? That's another question.
I don't think so. Not that I know of.
I wonder if Charlie was in both.
I don't believe he was.
Okay.
Because Christine Beard, Abigail Korfman, and Meg Woodworth wrote C20 Kithbook Boggans.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm not going to give a full accounting until I properly read through it again and actually with an eye for doing an episode on it, which will be later.
Soon. Well, yeah.
Not soon.
Later, but not next season. Soonish.
Probably fallish. We'll see. Wasn't that that wasn't the last one? Was it the first supplement or the last supplement?
I think it was second to last. I think Player's Guide was the last one.
So it went C20 core, then the Book of Freeholds, then Kithbook Boggans, then C20 Player's Guide. Okay.
Yes. Well, Yours to Keep was the first one, the sample story.
Right. I guess we'll do one episode on that too. Okay. Yeah. I've not read it yet.
Oh, well. Read and see. That's all I'll say. But for this one, we have read and we have seen, and hats off to Thad Papke and additional folk. I hope I'm saying the name right. Papke. Hats off to Thad and the team.
It's definitely giving a thumbs up, but maybe a raised second eyebrow.
There you go.
A few places. Oh, okay. So I guess that wraps it up there. Yeah, you can find us at changelingthepodcast.com. You can send us an email, podcast@changingthepodcast.com. Please, on YouTube, we're on YouTube now, Changing the Podcast, like and subscribe there.
Ring that bell.
Helps us. Ring that bell.
It's a bell, right?
The notifications. It doesn't always give you the notifications, but it helps. You can go on our Facebook page for Changeling the Podcast, and you can gossip about us at our Discord at discord.me/CTP. Did I miss anything? Oh, send us a toot also on Mastodon.
Yeah.
At changelingpod at dice.camp.
Links to all of the above will be provided in the show notes to this episode.
Yep. And once again, I'm Josh.
I remain Booga.
And remember, if you help people and don't ask for anything in return, they might still give you things in return.
And most other changelings like Boggans, but in the words of one of the most famous, not Boggan but Boggan adjacent characters, they don't know half of you half as well as they should like, and they like less than half of you half as well as you deserve.
I thought that was at 1/3.
Ah. Before his embrace in 1941 by noted Ventru and hot mess Lodin, Prince of Chicago, the Boggan Canine Alphonse Gabriel Capone was noted for his ruthlessness and cunning as a Prohibition-era crime boss. While his Fey relatives didn't approve of many of his dirty dealings, they were always sure to compliment him at family reunions on his business acumen, until he was imprisoned for tax evasion at least, and his exquisite taste for bootleg hooch. Capone played semi-professional baseball as a teenager, putting his skills with a bat to myriad uses later in life, but when asked recently what he missed most about his mortal youth, the cold-blooded parasite of the evening waxed poetic about the great sweep-offs among his changeling kin. "I never needed to roll any dice to sweep the room from one end to the other, see?" said Capone, "and I could do it in 1/3 the time it would take a normal human. Meh." Thanks to our intrepid interview team for securing that meeting, and to the troll bodyguards who ensured the interviewers made it out alive. Their efforts, as well as this podcast and other related projects, are supported by you, our listeners, and in particular by our patrons. You too can sign up for our Patreon at www.patreon.com/changelingthepodcast to receive benefits, including a shout-out at the end of each episode, like the following fine folks: Derek, Dorcadus, Elorus, Hugo the Bog Person, Ia Bull, Jason Vines, Oreo, Raz Caboose, Sandsugar, Sija, Terry Robinson, and Tricerabeth. Extra thanks to them. We also appreciate your likes and subscribes on YouTube, your presence on our Discord, and reviews on the podcast listening platform of your greatest convenience. Hopefully you've learned a thing or two about the Fae today, and if not, we'll be bringing you more next week. Until then, craft work safe and keep on dreaming.